One of our biggest struggles is that we do feel broken and we do feel like we have to be perfect or people will see that we're broken.
Hello, listeners. Welcome to this episode of The Blue Radio. Today, we will be hearing Mike's story. More than being a story about sexual abuse, Mike's story is about when abuse stays hidden and also how defense mechanisms that are developed through childhood have a detrimental effect in adulthood. They don't function as well as how they did when one was a child. In his story, Mike also talks about going through dissociation. And before we start listening to what he has to say, I'd like to give some background information about what dissociation and dissociative disorder is. Dissociation, in simple terms, is one of the ways that one's mind uh, deals with traumatic events and too much stress. And it is experienced differently. People who go through a dissociative episode say that they feel detached from themselves or detached from their bodies or from their surroundings. Dissociation can have various times. Some might have short episodes and some might have longer episodes. But if dissociation becomes a common way of dealing with stress in a person, they are said to have dissociative disorder. For more information about dissociation, please visit the link that I have included in the description of this episode. Another term that Mike uses while telling his story is a fugue state or a dissociative fugue. In a dissociative fugue, a person forgets their identity and their autobiographical information for some time and engages in some sort of travel. That being said, let's hear Mike's story.
First off, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story. Um, and I don't think any story about abuse, especially sexual abuse in childhood, is complete without understanding sort of the environment, the family, the dynamics, everything that was at play. Because I think it's very easy for in society to view child sexual abuse as, oh, that was a random pedophile outside the family just randomly grabbed these kids and nothing led up to that. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen. I think there are plenty of cases that we've seen that get major media attention, and they get major media attention because they are somewhat rare, right? It's not common, when we look at the statistics of childhood sexual abuse, that it is some random stranger in a parking lot or something like that. Again, that happens, but it's not the common story. The common story is much more like mine, I think. Um, and so when I look back at my story, I have to recognize what happened leading up to the sexual abuse that went on for a number of years. And that is, when I think about my family as a young child, I think of chaos. Uh, it's a large family. My parents had 6 boys, obviously a very sort of loud, chaotic household to start with. Introduced into that, for the first 12, 13 years of my life, my dad drank. He was an alcoholic, sometimes violent alcoholic. So introduce, mix in more chaos to the soup, if you will. Um, Somewhere along the lines, probably when I was 8 or 9 years old, there was an older, uh, but still minor, family member who was a few years older than me. Actually started at that point with the sexual abuse, with small things that just grew and grew over the years. Now, given his age when it started, I suspect he may have been sexually abused as well. Again, this is, the chaotic family, so all this stuff kind of goes unnoticed. I don't know that for a fact. I don't think it changes anything in terms of providing an excuse for what he did or anything like that. I don't. I'm not claiming that. I would never claim that. But it's a reality. It's a reality that I think I hope people walk away from hearing my story and understand that, there was just this freight train, and we'll talk about this a little bit later when we talk about, kind of healing, but there was this freight train, just heading down the tracks of a chaotic childhood of someone who targeted someone else in my family, and then it just kept going. I just happened to be there, right? And so, you know, when I think about how things led up to that, I recognize that I was vulnerable to that sort of thing because things would go unnoticed, right? That was easy, right? There was a lot going on in my family, um, and there was also a lot of stuff going on that we kept secret, right? We didn't talk about. So here I was, this kid growing up in this very chaotic household, didn't have a lot of fatherly attention and love, um, and also was really good at keeping secrets, right? Almost the perfect storm of the kind of kid you want to abuse because I'm not going to tell anybody. I want to hide it.
Mike effectively hid his abuse. He blended in and stayed out of trouble. He also started experiencing dissociation at this time.
And I think that, when I look at other aspects of my childhood in terms of what did it look like with my friends, what did it look like with school, um, those same sort of things come into play. I think I learned at a very early age that the easiest way to hide was just to just do what everybody expected me to do, right? So I was really good at school, right? I was a smart kid, being good at school, getting good grades, staying out of trouble was easy, right? I could do that. And so I did, right? I was an excellent student. I was the kid who never got in trouble. I was the kid your parents wanted to tutor you. I was the kid your parents wanted you to be friends with, right? Um, all the while, I was probably one of the most troubled kids out there, right? But I hid it, and I knew how to hide it. I knew how to hide it simply by doing all the things that you're supposed to do to be quote unquote the good kid. So I could do that, and then nobody ever asked, right? Which was ultimately what my goal was. My goal was not to be great at school or to be a good kid. My goal was for people to leave me alone, and they did, right? No one pried. No one came looking around, poking around my family to figure out what was going on, right? They just left me alone, and that's all I really wanted, right? Because I needed to hide these things. I was embarrassed. I was shamed into thinking I have to hide. I have to hide all the things that are going on in my family. Um, Whether you're talking about my dad drinking or sexual abuse or any number of other things that were going on, I have to hide it, right? And so I got really good at hiding it. I also got really good at dissociating, right? Um, the act of physically being in a moment but mentally not being there, watching it happen to someone else as if it wasn't myself. Also, a skill I developed as a child. I think a lot of trauma victims in childhood develop skills similar to that. Whether you talk about multiple personalities or various other forms of dissociation. Mine wasn't, a multiple personality thing. It was like watching somebody else on TV, right? I didn't develop another persona. I didn't develop another personality. I just simply checked out, right? Emotionally, I was not there. And so that made it easy. That was my defense mechanism. That's how I survived, right? Was just by checking out. Now, do I regret that? No, because it's what I had to do, right? It's what I had to do to survive, and I'm happy to have done it. I'm happy to have developed that skill, even though, as we get into later, in adulthood, that skill created a lot of issues. Um, it was the only thing that kept me going through childhood. So, that we do what we have to do as children. And I think that it is important to kind of forgive ourselves for that, um, to recognize that, dissociation as an adult may not be the healthiest behavior, but it's what I had to do as a child. And I survived it.
Going through childhood abuse caused Mike to enter adulthood unprepared, unable to take responsibilities, and unable to lead the adult life he was supposed to lead. He believes the defense mechanisms he developed as a child were detrimental to him as an adult.
I think one of the things that I've written about numerous times is the idea that when you're being abused and going through childhood trauma, you just sort of skip uh, the normal things that you might learn growing up. And I think you hit adulthood completely unprepared for what is needed, what's going to happen to you, right? So for me, I developed those great self defense mechanisms for dissociation and things like that, but I also developed this ability to simply blend in and do what people expected me to in order to not stand out. But as an adult, when you're presented with, hey, what do you want to do with your life? This becomes problematic, right? I had no ability to make decisions for myself because I grew up just doing what everyone expected me to do. And I think my early part of my adult life, I very much did the same thing. I got involved with the church, which was great because people could tell me what they expected me to do. I got into a bad marriage. I, made a lot of mistakes, and most of them come down to the fact that I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know how to define that. And I didn't know that I could define that. And I think that was also something that was very difficult as an adult, was just understanding that I have the ability to take responsibility for my own life and to build it the way I want to. That was a struggle. The other thing that was a struggle really for me was the self-defense mechanisms, right? When you're a kid, you're going through trauma, dissociation worked really well to keep me alive, to keep me going. When you're an adult and your marriage is going bad and your job is stressful and there's just a bunch of stress on your head, dissociation isn't really a good idea. Especially because, when you dissociate as a kid, you are where you are, right? You just sort of check out emotionally. When you dissociate as an adult and you have access to money in a car, that can start to look a lot different.
In this point of his life, Mike describes having gone through a fugue state.
I spent a good chunk of my mid 20s, late 20s, struggling. I initially had my first, the first time I had heard of the term, and the first time I was diagnosed as having a fugue state, which basically means you spend a long time kind of forgetting who you are. Not that I developed another personality or had anything like that, right? I still use the same name. I just sort of forgot that I had a life in Ohio at the time. I was married, had a job. That all just sort of was gone, and I drove around the country for weeks before something kind of reminded me that, oh wait, I have this life, and I've kind of forgotten about it for 3 weeks.
After this experience, Mike felt broken.
So I think that generally led then to me sort of feeling like I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. I don't know how this happened. I don't know how to fix this. And that really led to a lot of depression, suicide attempt, just a number of just about one bad decision after another, right? And one bad decision based on that simple fact: I'm broken. Right? There's something wrong with me. This is why all of this has happened to me. This is why I'm sick now. Right? It's all about what's wrong with me. And I think that was a very difficult thing to deal with, right? But at a certain point, the last sort of fugue state I had ended, ironically, in the same town I live in now, in Louisiana. Years and years later, I ended up moving here. But I wound up in the hospital. I had a very bad viral infection, spent some time in the hospital, and basically had nothing, right? That was it. This is all I got. And, again, that was all really about just not understanding how to be an adult, right? I didn't understand how to choose a mate, how to be a husband, how to work professionally. I thought I did, right? I watched other people and kind of thought, okay, I can just, emulate them. Um, but I never really felt like I could do it, that I had the ability. So it always seemed fake. It always seemed like I was faking it and never really making it, right? Because I never felt like I was in a good place, and always felt broken. Always felt like there was something wrong with me. And it was just a matter of time before people figured out that there was something wrong with me and started hurting me again.
Now, Mike talks about his unique journey to healing.
I didn't need to do a deep look, but I needed to get that big picture. I needed to kind of see that there was a person in my life who was going to hurt someone, whether I was there or not. They were going to hurt somebody. And I just happened to be there. I happened to be accessible, right? I happened to be in a position where I could get hurt by that person. And I think for me, understanding that and understanding that everything that happened in regards to being sexually abused was the decision and was the whatever the circumstance, right? They were all created by other people, right? In fact, unlike I just said, it wasn't me. I didn't do anything to attract it. I was not broken in some way that caused this to happen to me, right? It was going to happen, and there was nothing I could have done about it, right? The only thing I could have done was simply not be there, right? Which would have required something I wasn't capable of as a child, right? I was 9. Where was I going to go? Right? So I think sort of getting that understanding of, okay, this was going to happen regardless. I didn't do anything. I couldn't have avoided it, right? Taking that shame, taking that blame, taking all that guilt, right? Everything that I had grown up feeling like there's something wrong with me. Somehow I attracted this to myself. The universe doesn't like me. God doesn't love me. All the various things that we're told, right? Because we are told as children that good things happen to good people, right? We are told that bad things happen to bad people. And as a child, I was suffering and bad things were happening. And the only explanation that I had was, I must be bad. And that's so wrong. It was so wrong. And understanding that was so key, so important to get to that point where I understood I didn't do anything. This isn't my fault, right? Bad things do happen to people for no reason whatsoever that has anything to do with them, right? So understanding that was important. And then from there, right, again, kind of in my specific situation, looking at, okay, but now let's look at all the stuff I didn't learn as a child, right? How to make decisions, how to pick a good spouse, because I didn't. That marriage fell apart. How to be a professional, be successful at what I do for a living, how to decide what I want to do for a living, right? How to go out into the world as an adult and not hide and just take up space, for lack of a better term. And that took time, right? Again, working with the same therapist who helped me kind of recognize that it wasn't my fault, right? There was one day in therapy, more towards the end of it, where she just looked at me and she was like, what kind of life do you want? She was like, because now that we've gotten to the point where you don't blame yourself, this is all there's left, right? Go make your life. Go do something with it. How can I help you learn how to do that? And she did, and she was fantastic, right? Because she gave me that freedom, right? She gave me that, hey, you are an adult and you are capable of doing this and making your own decisions, and I'm going to help you. I'm going to teach you how. And that was huge. That was a huge part of understanding how to be an adult, how to go get a job, hold a job, be successful at a job, how to rent a house, how to, balance a budget. All these things that, again, I did learn as a kid, right? Someone may have attempted to teach me them at one point as a kid, but, all of my mental energy was spent just surviving and dealing with things. And so getting to that point of understanding that I could do these things. And not just that, but hey, when things get stressful, because life gets stressful, as we all know this year, if this year's proven anything, life gets stressful, life gets uncertain. Here's the things you can do other than dissociating, right? Instead of having a fugue state reaction to stress, let's talk about how you can handle these things. What sort of stress relievers can you manage? What kind of self-care can I develop, right? So that I don't push myself over the edge when it comes to stress and uncertainty and anxiety and all those things, right? And that's a struggle, right? To this day, I still struggle with that, right? I still struggle with anxiety. I still struggle with getting angry at myself and beating myself up when I make a mistake. I doubt I will ever outgrow that, right? But I survive it, right? I deal with it. I don't simply lose myself and in dissociation. I hang in there. I work through it. I recognize who I am, what I'm capable of. I rely on the support network of people in my life, my wife, because now I have a good marriage, right? My wife, my friends, my family, right? The people that I know I can depend on. I do that, right? I go out and I help understand that. I write my blog so that I'm constantly reminding myself, hey, here are some tips. Here are some things people do. I'm sharing those things on social media. One, because I want to share it, right? I think there's a lot of good information that should be shared, that people should know about. We should talk about these things. But also because I need to remind myself every once in a while, right? Don't get lost in work and life. Take some time to come over here and kind of look at some stuff. Look at some self-care tips. Look at, and those things. So for me, really healing came about in a very slow process, right? I always tell people you didn't get here in a month. You're not going to get out of it in a month. It's going to take time, and it does. But it's not impossible. It's worth it. It's not a straight line. Also, there were times where I was doing really well and I thought I was getting really healthy, and then it really wasn't. Had setbacks, had bad, horrible days. Had days where I didn't get out of bed, right? Even though I was in therapy and getting better, there were still days I couldn't do it, right? I just couldn't make it, right? And I had to allow for those days. I had to allow for those setbacks. Understand that it's the big picture, right? It's not what I did yesterday. It's what I've done over the years. It's not what is happening today. It's not the anxiety I feel watching the news now, right? It's the way back, 10, 15 years ago, what did I look like versus now, right? What kind of skills do I have now to deal with that anxiety, and knowing that if it gets bad enough, I'm going to go back into therapy. I'm going to go back. I'm going to look at getting help, right? I've done it before. I can do it again.
Let's hear Mike's concluding remarks.
It's such a struggle, right? Thinking about child abuse victims, survivors, one of our biggest struggles is that we do feel broken, and we do feel like we have to be perfect, or people will see that we're broken, and we're not, right? It's not to say we don't have effects. Clearly, we do, right? But we're not broken, right? What happened to us is not a result of our brokenness, right? What happened to us was someone else hurting someone and making that call. And I think that is just such, it's such an important key thing to learn. I believe once you can get to that point, truly believe that about yourself, then the rest we can teach you, right? like I said, all those things I didn't learn as a child, all those skills, social skills and decision-making skills, right? They can be taught. They can absolutely be taught, right? I was a little late. I didn't get that till my mid or late 20s, early 30s and I didn't really get good at it till a few years after that, maybe 10 years after that, right? So it took time, but it was teachable, right? I could learn it, right? When I couldn't learn it was when I viewed myself as broken and I was ashamed of myself, right? Because then I couldn't adapt, right? I didn't have the ability to learn new skills or learn new things at that point because I was broken. And that voice inside my head, every time I tried to do something new, said, you can't do this, you're broken. There's something wrong with you, right? I had to get rid of that voice, right? Or I had to learn to live with that voice. Or maybe instead of saying I got rid of it, that I had to learn to put that voice in its place. Say, no, that's not, what happened, that wasn't about me. That was about somebody else. I just happened to be there. And I think that if you can get there, then anywhere else you want to go, you can go.
One of the things I learned from Mike's story is the importance of resilience in the journey of healing. When stepping in this journey, it's important to realize that there will be setbacks, there will be bad days, but we have to keep trying and having faith and trust in ourselves. And survivors out there, what happened to you was not your fault, and you have to keep reminding yourself of that. Mike also asked me to share the link to his website, so please find this link in the descriptions of this episode. With that, I will end. Thank you for listening.